Good morning. Welcome to this second masterclass of the project Antigone's Pride Performing Society. Yesterday, we had the first masterclass of this second round of online masterclasses. It was on augmented and virtual reality for the performing arts. Today, we change completely the topic, and the masterclass is on women, myth, and theater. This is another core concept of the project that already in its title expresses the central role of the female figure within the project itself, Antigone's Pride. Antigone is at the center, indeed, of this path of artistic research and creation that pivots around the implementation of 3 eco-arts residencies in Spain, in Poland, and in Italy. We have already made the first one in Spain, in La Alberca and Salamanca, where we had the possibility to develop several activities in great nature reserve and cultural heritage sites, and work under the direction of Fabio Tolledi on the first creation of the international multilingual and site-specific performance Cantica Antigone, that was played in a marvelous place in La Alberca, in a nature reserve called Fuente Castaños. So the next step of the project will be in Poland, under the coordination of the Grotowski Institute, and this second residence that will gather also this group of international artists, experts in digital humanities and academics, will be from 6 to 18 of June. The title of this residence is Theater and Conflict, and indeed it will see the implementation of several activities in the nature, the second step in the creation of Cantica Antigone performance, and an international seminar on theater and conflict entitled Saving Hope, Theatrical Artivism in Spaces of Conflict, which will be held on 17 and 18 of June. You can find more information on the project on the website of Antigone's Pride, antigonespride.eu. There is really a lot to say on the project, but I don't want to take time to today's masterclass speaker, Samuela Pagani. So I'll just conclude my presentation speech, reminding the partners of the project. The project is promoted by Astragali Teatro with the support of the Creative Europe program of the European Union in partnership with the Grotowski Institute from Poland, with the University of Salento Augmented and Virtual Reality Lab from Italy, with the Theatro Tsi Zakynthos from Greece, and with the Foundation of Dance Alicia Alonso of the University of Madrid, Rey Juan Carlos. So today we have the honor and privilege to have as speaker Professor Samuela Pagani, Associate Professor of Arabic Language and Literature at the University of Salento. She holds a PhD from the prestigious Istituto Universitario Orientale in Naples, and she's been visiting professor at the Ecole des Études en Sciences Sociales, Institut d'Études de l'Islam et des Sociétés du Monde Musulman, and at the Ecole Pratique des Hautes Études. She had published several books on Arabic culture and also on medieval philosophy. So I'm very pleased to give the floor to Samuela, whose intervention will have a very intriguing and interesting title: Forgotten Queens, Revered Rebels, Women in Islamic Imagery. And it's a very important topic for the project because the project also is trying to foster the mutual knowledge of different culture, as well as to dispel prejudices about unknown cultures and unknown areas of the world. So it's very important for us to deepen some aspects of the cultural heritage in Islamic imagery, especially through the eyes and experiences of women. And as Antigone is our driving light, this comes very, very much welcome, this speech of Samuela. Please, Samuela, thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you to Roberta and Fabio, Simonetta, Ivano, and all the friends of Astragali for this invitation, which I took as a friendly conversation, not as a conference or a course. And so I will share with you my PowerPoint if I succeed. And this is to reveal that the first part of my title took its clue from che devo fare? No. Questo si può... No, non si può togliere, perché sennò poi non so più manovrar. So I took my clue in the first part of the title from a very known book, bestseller by the famous French historian, thinker, and feminist Fatima Mernissi, which was first published, I think, in French in 1990. The Forgotten Queens of Islam is a revendication in some ways of the possibility of rereading Islamic history against the grain, so as to rediscover what was lost in the memory of official history, but also to critique the masculine approach to the history of Islam. The personage which appears in the cover should be, it is not written in the back, but should be Aisha, the spouse of the Prophet Muhammad, the young spouse of the Prophet Muhammad, the most beloved of his spouses, according to some traditions, who is famous and infamous at the same time in historical memory, because a few years after the death of the Prophet, led the armed opposition against the fourth Caliph, Ali ibn Abi Talib, the most revered Imam and founder of Shiism, as he later became. And so Aisha was the emblematic embodiment of what women should not do. She was present in the battlefield, mounted on, but perhaps it is not. I mean, she mounted on a camel, while the image in this cover, as I see now, is mounted on the horses. So perhaps it is not her. But anyway, what Fatima Mernissi says about this emblematic figure of the first generation of Muslim women, the most saintly category of the first generation of Muslim women, the people of the house of the Prophet, so the spouses of the Prophet, is at the same time a protagonist of the first political battles which divided Islam at its beginnings, and Aisha is at the same time a source of the religious authority of the Prophet, the sayings of the Prophet, which are an essential part of the Islamic foundational text, the Hadith. Well, these sayings of the Prophet are orally mediated, mostly by the persons who were closest to him. And so among them, Aisha and the other women of the house of the Prophet. So she's on one side, a pillar of Islamic tradition, and on the other, the negative example of, as Mernissi says, the first woman who took a political decision by leading armed men remains forever linked in Muslim memory with the fitna, which is stasis in, if you want, civil war, division and seduction at the same time. It's a very pregnant term. And she was particularly reviled in Shi'i tradition because her adversary on the field, Aisha's adversary on the field, as I mentioned, was Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is a Persian miniature of the Battle of the Camel. So this battle among Aisha and her supporters and Ali and his party. And we have here the woman mounted on the camel, on the special portantina on her camel, and Ali, who is surrounded by a flame, which is the kind of aureola, is the mark of his special status and sainthood. This is remarkable that everyone in the picture is without veil, except the two protagonists, because they are the most saintly, the saintly figure in the image, and so this is why this for out of respect and protection of their sanctity, and not because it is forbidden to show the face, that they are veiled, both of them. And on the face of Ali, it is visible his name. In the place of the signs of the face, we have the signs of the letters, which are legible in some way as a drawing. And this is a detail of the same image, where we see that at the center of this composition, we have a polarization of in the two parties between the woman and the opposant, and the saintly man mounted on a horse. And so this is a kind of typological interpretation, or archetypical interpretation of this historical fact, which is, as every historical fact which becomes a myth, is reimagined through archetypes. So in the figure of Aisha, was projected, for example, the Queen of Sheba, who was subjugated by Solomon. And in this image, if we want, we could also see between the Aisha mounted on the even though with the on a portantina, on a litter, and Ali mounted on a horse, we could even see a trace of a memory of the struggle between Queen Alexandra and the Amazons, which is narrated in the Romance of Alexander, this great bestseller of Hellenistic times, which circulated in all of the Mediterranean and beyond, up to Iran and even India, and which became, starting from the Quran, one of the foundational, the Roman of Alexander, so the adventures of Alexander, one of the foundational myths of Islam, starting from the Quran, so starting from the sacred text of Islam. And so the armed struggle between a warrior woman and a hero, which needs to win because he represents the good as against an evil principle, is ingrained in the historical and in mythical imagination of Islam, as well as in Western culture, and has in part common roots, which are either biblical or classical, Greek in the most immediate present. And in this kind of opposition, and in my opinion, also the starting point of an approach such as that of Fatima Mernissi, we have in the idea that women can do it as well as men, and in question is mainly a struggle for leadership. A theme which is connected to the political role of women as opposant and antagonists or rival of men for power. We have another beyond historiography, another important field of investigation which still needs to be well researched, which is the presence of women in epic literature. Popular Arabic epics is a very important genre which cuts across time and also cuts across social stratas and levels of languages, because it is mostly written in Middle Arabic, which is something middle way between the vernacular, the vulgar language or the dialect, and the grammatical classical Arabic. Here we have a Tunisian underglass painting representing, I don't know if you see it well, the couple of the black hero Antara and her beloved Abla, who are both of them riding beasts. Also in this case, we have the man on the horse and the woman on a camel, and which is a reminder of the importance of female activity and even heroism in this kind of folk tales in the form of poems, which are recited and have been recited all along the Middle Ages and were still much part of the popular culture until these last years. I struggling with the sweeping force of violence and innovations and modernization. But the best investigation on this kind of literature was written recently by Remke Krook, who I have a quotation from the conclusion of her book on this topic, where she remarks that I can't read it because it is occupied by, in part, by the images of myself and the participants.
Puoi fare questo. Puoi abbassarlo, poi te lo riattivi facendo questi due. Ok, grazie, prego.
So she says, in the Bedouin epics, the existence of independently acting warrior women, foreign as well as of Arab stock, is accepted as a natural occurrence. A striking point in the epics, in particular the Bedouin ones, is that gender roles are often reversed, or at least run counter to what the average Western reader would expect. Women defeat and humiliate men on the battlefield, causing not anger but passionate love. Clearly, male audiences enjoyed hearing such stories, in spite of the fact that men were often the weaker party in them, and even sometimes ridiculed. This latter aspect may seem somewhat puzzling, but what ought to be kept in mind is that audiences have no trouble identifying with a person of the opposite sex. The girl playing a heroic role is female, not despite the maleness of the audience, but precisely because of it. The discourse is wholly masculine, and females figure in it only insofar as they read some aspect of male experience. So, in short, the conclusion of this well-researched study about this presence of warrior women in the Arabic epic invites us not to make too many illusions about the emancipatory role women could play in such plays, because they are, in any case, projection of a male agency in both forming and enjoying this kind of plays. This is for what concerns the first part of my title, the Forgotten Queens, and what has to do with conflict of power between men and women. So, for the second part of my title, Revered Rebels, the question I propose there is, what about more radical conflicts concerning the nature of politics rather than a struggle for leadership between men and women? So radical conflicts about the nature of politics in which contestation comes from below and is effectively embodied by women. I don't mean is essentially belong to women, but is effectively embodied by women in the works of art, in a religious tradition, and so in the imagination of the Islamic world. And so since Antigone's role was interpreted, starting from at least Aristotle, as a conflict between the general or universal law of nature and the particular law of the state, the question can be also, what about the memory of Antigone in Islamic culture? And here comes the sensational part of my paper, so my presentation. Well, it's obvious that Antigone is very present in the thought and consciousness of contemporary Arabic culture as a world culture, which was attuned and adjusted to the clock of, or to the Western clock, and the Western clock and Western references and so on, starting from the end of the 19th century, and is a fruitful resource. I mentioned one adaptation of Antigone, which was staged in Beirut. I don't know if you heard of it, which was staged in Beirut in 2014 by a group of Syrian women refugees from Syria to Lebanon, and it was quite an exceptional experience, because these women, which were not at all professional actresses, took their inspiration from Antigone as a way to find a way to express themselves and narrate their stories on stage, and the effect was quite impressive. This is one image of one of these actresses, and there are materials online which can help to reconstruct what display looked like. But it is obvious so that Antigone is part of contemporary Arabic culture. But my question concerns what about the traces of her presence in pre-modern Arabic culture, and the only traces I'm aware of is quite interestingly in Averroes' commentary on Aristotle's rhetoric, because Aristotle in his treatise on rhetoric mentions twice Antigone as the embodiment, in fact, of the voice, if you want, the voice of natural or universal justice against the law of the state represented by crown, the tyrant. And the Aristotle rhetoric as his poetic was part of the foundation of philosophical and not only philosophical of high culture in Islam, beginning from the movement of translations from Greek and from Syriac into Arabic in the 8th and 9th and 10th century. So theologians, philosophers, and even grammarians, and so specialists in religious sciences were learned to think through reading and commenting Aristotle. It was so this was the basis, the basic higher formation in Islam, as it had been in Alexandria before Islam, so in the Hellenistic and then Roman Mediterranean, and as it will be in Western Middle Ages through translations from Arabic into Latin of Greek thought mediated by Arabic rethinking and reformulations. So and the rhetoric has two mentions of Antigone in this role, as I mentioned, and has been this text by Aristotle as his poetics has been the object of a number of commentaries in Arabic by all of the major philosophers of Islam, starting from Al-Farabi in the 10th century, continuing with Avicenna in the 11th, and arriving to Averroes in Muslim Spain in the 12th century. And while Al-Farabi and Avicenna in the preceding centuries rendered in their commentaries the general sense of Aristotle's opposition between natural or universal and particular law, they left aside the reference, Aristotle's reference to the story of Antigone. And while Averroes represents an exception, because while not mentioning the names of Antigone or Sophocles or Polinices, nevertheless, he makes an abridgment of the story. And this abridgment of the story is, to my knowledge, quite exceptional, worth pondering, because we know that in his commentary on the Poetica by Aristotle, Averroes didn't go into detail about what tragedy is and how tragedy functions, considering that it was particular to Greek culture and could not be translated into an exact corresponding genre in Arabic literature. And so, the exact meaning also of tragedy and comedy is well known and famous as one of the greatest cultural misunderstandings between classical Western literary culture and the Eastern and Semitic, Arabic, and not only Arabic, but also Syriac one. So it is quite remarkable that in the context of rhetoric, where aesthetic and political questions strictly merge, meet, Averroes actually abridges quite faithfully Aristotle's description of the story of Antigone as the emblem of the opposition between universal justice and the law of the state. And so I only read the part in bold, which is, there are two passages in the middle commentary on Aristotle's rhetoric by Averroes, where the story is mentioned. No, I'll read all of it. By unwritten laws, I mean those that naturally exist in all people. So the commentary of Averroes is a kind of reformulation in his own words. So when he says I, he means I, Averroes, I as I understand the great master, but I am myself at the same time. I mean those that naturally exist in all people. They are the ones in which everyone naturally sees what is just and what is unjust, even if there does not exist between one person and another any agreement or contract. These laws are also generally called universal laws in this respect. Nobody knows when these laws were laid down and who laid them down. They are often contrary to written laws, and they are used for persuasion to demonstrate that what one believes to be unjust according to written laws is not unjust. This is like what Aristotle has said about a man famous among the Greeks. When it was reported that this man was not properly buried according to the law of his country, the excuse given about the manner of his burial was that he was buried according to universal law, which is the law of nature, and therefore the manner of his burial was just and not unjust. As to written laws proper to each particular people, they are like the laws according to which some people consider that one should not kill animate beings, that is animals, for that is unjust. In effect, this is not an obligation among all people, nor it is an obligation by nature. So in this first passage, when we have an abridgment of Sophocles' tragedy, it is clear that Averroes agrees with Aristotle in identifying the story as an emblem of justice, eternal justice, as against the contingent coercive law of the state. And it is significant that that Averroes agrees with Aristotle on this point, or concerning this example, because this middle commentary is in fact quite original. In the second example that Aristotle mentions of universal law is in fact completely reversed in Averroes' commentary, because this the last three lines I read about not killing animals in Aristotle is a quotation from Empedocles, and it is also described as an example of universal law, that no living being should be killed, while in Averroes' commentary it becomes a particular law, because it is in contradiction, in fact, with the law of Islam, which permits killing living beings under specific condition, but sacrificing animals is part of the Islamic sacred law, while an opposition between the written and unwritten law is inscribed and understandable within an Islamic conception of the law. In the second passage of this text by Averroes, so on this, where the argumentations in forensic oratory, the argumentation based on various topics is examined in detail, and among the argumentations in court, which is a kind of staging justice, there are the arguments based on universal law as opposed to particular law, and here occurs the second mention. So a fifth place in argumentation is that the unwritten law is permanent and invariable, for it is in people's natural disposition, whereas written laws are variable and change. A story has been told about a woman well known to the Greeks who defended the burial of a man among them in a manner different from what the written law required, saying, "I would not bury him according to a law that exists today and will not exist tomorrow, but according to a law that never expires." So the first observation which we can make on this subject is that rhetoric, this topic of rhetoric is thought for a stage, not the stage of a theater, the stage of a court, the stage of the trial, the legal debate. And this is much interesting because it relates to a situation which is everywhere present in Arabic social practice. So we have scores of literary texts which represent debates and confrontations and argumentations with the public, which is called to judge, and also to identify in the different parts confronting themselves and speaking. So it is remarkable anyway that the only known abridgment of the plot of a Greek tragedy in Averroes occurs in the context of a debate for justice as a set of topical arguments to be employed in this context of persuasive speech. So we have a trace of the memory of Antigone, even if her name is not present, in a fundamental philosophical text, which is Averroes' commentary on Aristotle's rhetorics. But so obviously this is not a book which is circulated in the mind of everyone, in the hands of everyone. Still, we could ask what predisposed Averroes to the positive reception of this model, of the model of a woman who, with her speech, resists the particular law of a specific ruler in a state in the name of an eternal unwritten law, which Averroes underlines, emphasizes, is often contrary, in opposition to written law. I think that he could find lots of examples of women of this kind in Islamic memory and tradition, which is extremely popular, starting from Sufi hagiography. So Sufi hagiography, we have not the story of Antigone, but archetypes which could effectively embody this the unwritten law, and women effectively embodied the unwritten law because they were often unlettered, and so and the word which signifies being unlettered in Arabic, the unlettered person is called ummi, and ummi comes from which is mother. So unlettered is not someone who has something less than other, who does not have letter, but is one which is as his mother made him, so who is closer than others to the source of knowledge, which is the knowledge of heart as opposed to intellectual and logical, so thoughts mediated by words and articulated, logically articulated. And this is why women effectively are archetypals of the unwritten law and its tension with written law, but also with its complementarity with written law within Islam. And so the most famous Muslim Arabic woman ascetic from the 2nd century of Islam, so 8th century of our era, very close to the beginning of Islam, is Rabia al-Adawiya, well present also in contemporary memory. There were Egyptian films about her. Perhaps there are even series about her. I don't know series, but Rabia al-Adawiya significantly, so it's this ecstatic ascetic, but also great orator. She's mentioned among the famous women speakers of early Islam. There are anthologies compiled since the 9th century of famous female orators, and among them is mentioned also Rabia. And so Rabia, has an oral teaching. She didn't write books, as many authorities of the early centuries of Islam, and as the almost totality, with a couple of exceptions, of women in the pre-modern time. So we have no books authored by women, except for a few exceptions. So we know Rabia as Socrates, as the pre-Socratics, through quotations, through oral quotations from direct witnesses. And among the sayings which are attributed to her, there is this encounter with the body of a condemned man crucified as the common punishment in the Roman Empire, which was inherited by the Islamic Empire. In Basra, Rabia came across a man who had been arrested and crucified for immorality. She said, "Upon my father, with that tongue you used to say, there is no God but God." Sufyan Thawri said, then she mentioned the good works that the man had done. This is really a small fragment, but I think that there is a teaching, and it is that we have a testimony of a distinction between the secular condemnation of the man who was punished and executed, and the religious dignity of the man, because he's someone whose tongue mentioned God, so who bore the remembrance of God within him, and who could be remembered for his good actions, notwithstanding the shame, public shame of this ignominious death. And Sufyan Thawri is the disciple who gives the clue to this reading of the story. And Sufyan Thawri was the main disciple of Rabia al-Adawiya, is one of the founders of Islamic jurisprudence. So in the relation between Rabia and Sufyan, we have a kind of emblem of the relation between the unwritten law, the law of the heart, if you want, and the written law, the corpus of Islamic legal jurisprudence, which is the condition that the particular law is related to its principle, to its origin, which is the unwritten law, is the condition for the justice of the particular law, the written law. And Sufyan Thawri is a teacher of Muslim lawyers, who in turn learns from this unlettered woman to recognize the dignity of a man, even when he is crucified and exposed to public shame. And then we have another iconic figure, which is known even more fragmentarily, and which is from the same period as Rabia al-Adawiya, who is only her name is known. She was a black woman, a very young woman, and a slave and a shepherd, whom the people in Kufa considered mad, and she wore a wool cloak embroidered with words "not for sale," and she also is a messianic figure, because her sheep kept company with wolves, and the wolves didn't eat the sheep, and the sheep didn't fear the wolves. So it is an anticipation of the messianic kingdom, in fact. And "not for sale" is the oxymoron, the contradiction between her legal status as slave and their true condition as not only a human being, but a saint, someone who is not for sale because she, yes, because she transcended also her limited self to be free, because she went beyond her limited self in her direct relationship with God. But the model for excellence of the woman speaking in the name of the divine law, which the universal law is easily identified with the divine law, against the law of the state and the power of the tyrant, is one of the great heroines of the house of the Prophet, the family of the Prophet. She's the sister of Al-Hussein, the son of Ali, so the fourth caliph, the one who was opposed by Aisha. And so the greatest martyr of Islam, and the main figure around which the Shi identity and the rituality coalesced. He was killed ferociously in Kerbala, in the south of Iraq, in 680 by the army of the Umayyad Caliph Al-Yazid. And this massacre became actually also a ritual representation in the Shi ritual, the ta'ziyah, which means consolation, is the principal theatrical form which took place in pre-modern Islam, and which is quite specific of Shiism. But the oration, the speeches of the protagonists are in everywhere present, not only in the ta'ziyah, but in anthologies of rhetorical speeches, of orations, as the one I mentioned before, in historiographical texts, in geographical texts. So it is a shared memory between Sunnis and Shiites. And Zainab is the great voice of the contestation of Yazid's legitimacy in the name of the divine justice. And she's an extremely eloquent speaker. She speaks in two main stages: the battlefield in Karbala, so at the presence of the dead body of her brother, and the court of Yazid, where the brother is the head of her brother is exposed by the victorious tyrant. And so this is the beginning of her speech, where there is an explicit opposition between the divine law, which is apparently powerless at the present moment, and the appearance of power, which is represented by the sovereign on the throne, but which is an illusory power, a temporary and ephemeral power. And Zainab in the modern times was translated theatrically and written as a drama, as a tragedy, by an Egyptian dramatist and a novelist, Abdurrahman al-Sharqawi, who reread the story in a socialist perspective, and whose drama was never put on stage because of the veto of Al-Azhar, which repeated itself in the 70s and at the beginning of this century again. And she was among the great models of Muslim women who were exalted by the revolutionaries of the 20th century. Among the most important of them, Alicia, who was one of the main intellectuals which prepared the ground for the Iranian Revolution of 78-79, even though he was persecuted by the new regime of the Ayatollah after the victory of the revolution. So he makes of Zainab the one who stood against the ruling oppressive power and who had the force to oppose the caliphate, identified as a tyranny, which succeeded the Iranian and Byzantine empires. And he concludes, yes, all of these miracles belong to a woman. Thus, when a woman is a conscious and responsible, committed woman, sees such heroics from a woman who belonged to Fatima's family, she understands where she must look, how she must be. She realizes that a woman of any age and any century can emulate this model. So really a role model of a woman who can speak out and be a protagonist in a revolutionary movement. But so to conclude on another suggestion, source of inspiration in conflicts between powers of different nature, we can't forget the many heroines of the 1001 Night who engage magical battles, and in which the stake is giving back the human shape to someone who has been imprisoned by a sorcerer or a sorceress in a degrading form, the degrading form of an animal, for example. And I was surprised to find in an Arabic text from the 13th century, the Arabic Infancy Gospel, so an apocryphal gospel translated into Arabic from Syriac, a story of counter metamorphosis in which not only Jesus but the Virgin Mary plays a major role, because this is a series of stories in this part of the Infancy Gospels which take place during the flight to Egypt of the Holy Family. So the baby Jesus, Mary and Joseph traverse, make a kind of pilgrimage throughout Egypt. And here, the great protagonist of the miracles which are accomplished by Jesus and that are often counter miracles against the magical powers of Egyptian sorcerers. So the main agent is Mary through the infant Jesus, who is not yet speaking, is still an infant. And so among the stories we have the story of three young girls who are very sad because their brother has been transformed into an ass. And so the Virgin Mary takes pity of her and makes the baby Jesus on the back of the ass, so that the young boy takes back his original shape. And the archetype of this story is in itself found in Greek hagiography about Egyptian monks, written at the beginning of the Christian era, in about the 3rd, 4th century, the Lausiac story, where we find, in fact, reactualization of the struggle between Moses and the magicians of Pharaoh, narrated in the Bible, in the Exodus, and re-narrated in the Quran. So, to conclude, in some way, what is specific of Arabic culture? Not the fact that it is an Arab culture, but it is a different way to say and to articulate the common myths circulating across an area which is culturally, which has not clear-cut cultural frontiers, even though we are driven to think of this, think of clear-cut cultural frontiers, because we have concrete frontiers, armed frontiers, and so on, which oblige us to be different.
Thank you so much, Samuela, for this amazing, precious speech, and for reminding us that the key is always syncretism of cultures, which there are no frontiers and borders between cultures, and even in the past times, maybe there were less frontiers than now. And thank you so much also for posing the reflection of Antigone in such a deep way, recalling the concept of justice and of unwritten laws, of going back to the sources of life, to the womb of the earth, which is something that Antigone strongly still recalls to us, still shouts to us, maybe in her fragile and tenacious presence over the centuries. So thank you very much, Samuela. It was really a privilege to hear from you and to have the opportunities to get into this universe of knowledge, which deserves such an attention and care. Thanks so much, Samuel. And now the Zoom meeting participants will have the opportunity to continue this meeting with Samuela, and we can make her questions. So I will just now close the live streaming, reminding that in the afternoon there will be the third masterclass of this second cycle that will see the presence of Professor Miroslav Kocur, Professor of Performing Arts and Theatre Anthropology at University of Wrocław, and Professor of Acting and Directing at Stanislav Jaspiansky National Academy of Theatre Arts, who participated also in Jerzy Grotowski's paratheatrical projects and Theatre of Sources. The title of his speech will be From the Ecological Paratheater to the Theatre of Sources, beginning at 5 for who will follow us on in live streaming this afternoon. So thank you very much again to Samuela Pagani and to her Forgotten Queens and Revered Rebels. Thank you so much, and thank you to the people who could follow on YouTube.